The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The webinar will begin shortly. Please remain on the line. The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello and welcome to the Community Listening Forum hosted by us, members of the Police Chief Promotion Panel. Before we get started, I thought we could do a round of introductions just so that you know who's here on camera, and I'll get started, or I'll start us off. My name is Anita Tonakarn-Wen, and I'm a member of our Select Board, and I'm also going to be moderating tonight's forum.
Hi, I'm Jody Ross, the Town Manager.
I'm Noel Almeida. I'm a resident in town.
Sky Hazelton, a fellow Select Board member of Anita's, and I guess sort of co-host, if you will, or co-organizer of this event.
Yep. Great. So we are only a part of the panel, but we're happy to be here. There are other people listening in and other folks who just weren't able to join us tonight. I wanted to start off with just a few housekeeping items. The first is that this is a public meeting, and so it is being recorded. Thank you to Westford Cat for recording this meeting for us, as well as streaming it live. And since it's a public meeting, all comments and questions that are submitted to us are subject to public record, so please do not send over any confidential information. But if you are here with us live on the webinar and you do want to submit a comment or a question, please use the chat feature of GoToWebinar. It's going to be in a little box in the top right corner of your screen. I'm going to keep a lookout for those questions, as well as Mike Wells, who's also on the line with us. He's our IT director, and he's just helping us tonight with all of the behind the scenes work, and we'll be on the lookout for any issues that someone might have, and just be an extra set of like backup eyes for us. And so we so appreciate your help tonight, Mike. I'm going to pull up a slide deck that we've prepared for you this evening, so it's just going to take me a quick second. Can you all see that okay? Maybe get back up. Okay. So the Community Listening Forum, we just want to take a moment to talk about the purpose of tonight's forum, and that really is to create a dedicated space, right? To create some dedicated time to hear directly from you, members of the community, about things that are important to you, things that we should be considering as a panel as we undergo this process. And it's also a dedicated time to answer your questions about the process. We don't appoint a new police chief very often, and so we know that there are questions about, what does this process look like? Who's involved? What's the timeline? And in general, we want to get this right? Because we don't want to go through this process again anytime soon. And so understanding the community's needs are important to us. And also, it's very likely that the candidates of people who are those who are applying for the police chief position are listening or will be listening at a later time. And I think it's important for them to hear directly from the community as well about what's important to you. Could move on to our agenda. Our agenda is pretty simple. Jody Ross, our town manager and resident authority of the civil service, will provide an overview of the police chief promotion process, and that'll be followed immediately by a moderated question and answer period, where I'll read aloud the questions that you've submitted through the chat, and then we'll open it up to the panel for responses. So I will now turn it over to Jody Ross.
Thank you. So just for history, a little history lesson. Westford did adopt civil service by ballot on February 8th, 1937. And the purpose of civil service was really twofold: to ensure that the applicants have the necessary skill sets, and also to ensure that favoritism, nepotism, our political favors, retaliation were not part of the hiring process. So when an opening occurs in the police department, it's a complex civil service process that we follow. And that involves the town, the State Human Resources Division, which we also refer to as the HRD, and civil service unit certifications and appointments. So about the process, civil service law requires that appointing authorities select qualified applicants by either those who pass a promotional exam or those who complete an assessment. Our town has chosen to go the assessment route. So any officer who's eligible to apply for the police chief may apply for this position, and that's determined by closest rank to the chief. So that opens it up to the deputy, captains, and lieutenants. You have to have at least 4 applicants, or you open it up to lower ranks. So basically what we have done is chosen to hold an assessment center to further evaluate the candidates. The town enters a delegation agreement with the Human Resources Division, which outlines the terms of the assessment center. The assessment center will be used as the basis for scoring and ranking candidates on an eligible list. So the assessment center is designed to determine the officer's knowledge, skills, abilities, and personal characteristics based upon the results of exercises that are conducted to coincide with the job task analysis, which is determined based on the police chief's job description. After that assessment process is complete, the HRD is presented with the top 3 candidates in order of points they obtained during the assessment. Some additional points are available for things such as military service. That adds 2 points to the score, or in title experience, meaning if you've served as an acting police chief, and that would be added to the final score. The HRD then gives the final ranking to the town, and we receive the top 3 candidates. We have a promotional panel, which is town-based, and we'll talk about that in a minute. They will then interview the top 3 candidates and make their recommendation to me, the town manager. I then make my recommendation to the select board. They ultimately have the authority to ratify our recommendation.
Should I move on to the next slide? Okay.
Did you want me to speak to this, Anita?
No, that's fine. I didn't know if you had a
One chart. No. So these are the reviewers in the promotional process, or the promotional panel, which I referred to. So the vendor that we hired to conduct the police chief assessment center is Public Safety Consultants. And we've been working with them over the past several weeks. And the police chief promotional panel is made up of Noel Almeida, who's on this session tonight, Eric Heidemann, Assistant Town Manager, Scott Hazelton, Select Board, and Town and School Safety Task Force, Pam Hicks, our Director of Human Resources, Jeff Morissette, our Director of Land Use Management, myself, Joe Targ, our Fire Chief, and Anita, who is our Select Board and Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion member. So the timeline is we already selected the assessment center vendor. That vendor has submitted the assessment center exercises to the HRD, and he is awaiting their approval. Once that is approved, then there will be a posting so people can sign up at the police department. Once we are presented with the top 3 candidates, then we will conduct interviews. We will research a consensus or reach a consensus of findings, and then make our recommendations.
Great. So that was our very high level overview of the process that we're undergoing here in Westford. And we do have some questions that we have for you, for the community. I think people may be thinking of their own questions, and we'll be entering it in the chat. You're welcome to do that. But in the meantime, if there are some thoughts or anything that you'd like to share with us, there are some few questions here that we've posed. What key traits or characteristics are you looking for in the next police chief? If you're thinking, depending on what hat you wear, you know, if maybe from the perspective of a student or a resident or a business owner in town, what would you like this panel to consider during the interviews? And of course, there's that very open, just general, what questions do you have for us? So I don't see any questions coming in yet. I don't know if anyone's typing it. You're very welcome to. And any of the panelists are welcome to chime in if there's anything you want to say while we're waiting. Yes, Jody.
So I'll just chime in here. And obviously, we think diversity, equity, and inclusion is extremely important in our entire town, and it's something that recently the select board formed a committee. So we definitely want to be sure our new chief understands the need to support the mission, and that is committed to making sure the department also supports the mission. And the second item that comes to mind is the mental health issues that we have talked about through the Town and School Safety Task Force and in our town. And certainly maybe due to the pandemic and probably before the pandemic, there are a lot of mental health issues that are involved in some of the calls we respond to. So we definitely want to be sure our new chief recognizes that and either puts things in place to respond to that, to help with that, understands that, works with our local hospitals and agencies that support mental health. So those are the two things that I think we definitely want to be sure our new chief is aware of and passionate about, like our town is.
So we do have one question that came in, but Noel and Scott, do you guys want to go first before we address this question?
I just want to say I had the good fortune to be part of the panel that selected our current deputy chief or acting police chief. And what was impressed with that process was it was all our current lieutenants and captains that had applied, and all of them did extremely well with the assessment center, scored very, very high. And in interviews, the 3 finalists all did, really quite a fine job. So I just wanted to impress upon the community. We've got some very strong candidates in house, to be our next chief. We should, as a town, feel very good about the leadership in our department.
Noel, did you want to say something before I?
Sure. So, Jody or Anita, could you talk about the timeline real quick for the benefit of everyone on the call?
Sure.
Do you want me to
Going
speak
back to the timeline slide?
Yeah. So I think we don't have the months on here really, but as I mentioned, the assessment exercises are with the HRD now. We expect them to approve those in the next couple of weeks. And then I believe it takes approximately 8 weeks to get through the process. So it's our expectation that we will have a recommendation by the end of July that we will then bring forward to the select board. So it's a very lengthy process, very involved, and it takes several months. So.
Okay. Yep, Scott.
One of the things. So when we interviewed, in fact, all of us on this panel tonight interviewed the various candidates for assessment center, and the one chosen, we asked explicitly how they, or do they, and how do they incorporate DEI into their exercises, and they were quite clear. This is a top priority for most departments. It's a top priority for them, and we can't, obviously share the exercise because that would be giving away information to our candidates, but it is a very real factor in the scoring that we're going to be giving our future chief.
Okay. So we do have some questions that have come in that I'm going to open up to the entire panel, and anyone is welcome to answer those questions, or if we want to add to anyone else's answer, please feel free to do so. So the first question is, are only Westford officers eligible to apply? Yes, Jody.
Yes, I made the decision that we should keep this in-house. We have 49 police officers, and I am a very strong proponent of promoting from within. We have a very well-run police department. We have not fired a gun in 50 plus years. We have never used excessive force. I mean, are we perfect? No, but we have a group of really excellent officers that receive top-notch training. So to pull an officer from another town and bring them to our town, in my opinion, is not the best way to ensure that we continue the excellent police department that we have and improve upon that. And so that's why I support promoting from within. We have done that throughout the history of the Westford Police Department, and I did not see a reason to stray from that. So.
Anything else anyone wants to add before I move on to the next question? Okay. This one might need some elaborating to the person, and for some reason the questions box is really small for me. I can only see a little bit at a time, but it says, would like the panel to consider training approaches of the staff, not just book or video training. How do experiences dealing with situations trained? Can you elaborate? Yep, Jody.
So I think these are, I think, supposed to be questions more about what we're looking for in our new police chief. So I certainly think that a new police chief could be asked for ways to improve the training. I know there's all sorts of training that they do, starting with the police academy throughout the years. And I'm sure we can speak to this directly with the current acting chief. But I'm honestly not sure that I would classify this as a question for consideration for a new chief. I certainly would hope they would be open to all training aspects.
Okay. As a panel, how will you determine the applicant's understanding of and commitment to DEI? I mean, I can go first, but I'm sure other people have other things. You're welcome to obviously add your own opinions and stuff to it too, because we all have different perspectives, right, to this table. And basically, things that I would look for are really the approach to DEI, the approach to diversity in our community, and what those relationships look like, how they feel that there are opportunities for relationship building, and how well they grasp like social justice issues and where they see opportunities for improvement. Kind of as Jody was saying, you know, we haven't had reports of like excessive force in town. We don't have a problem with that here, but as long as there's the recognition of there's always room for improvement, we can always do better. And it's a collaborative approach with conversations of people who are in town with lived experiences, then I think that's what would make everything stronger, right? And I don't have all the answers, obviously, even sitting on the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Committee. And I don't think I should be expected to have all of those answers, but we all together can figure out those solutions and really look for people who are willing to step up and be part of those conversations. That's my first thought. Scott?
Yeah, I just add to that. You know, we don't, you know, having done this panel a few times myself between, you know, actually the fire chief and the deputy police chief, the questions we ask are not, you know, tell me how you feel about the role of leadership under DEI. It's really more a question of examples. You know, we don't have our questions finalized yet. That's one reason why we're here tonight. But you know, in the past, if you're dealing with things like you know, morale, we have a you know, specific question: how would you deal with this situation? And so I expect that with the DEI, we will have at least one and perhaps several questions that deal with this went, you know, wrong or could have gone wrong. Not real examples, but potentially, how would you deal with this as the leader? So, you know, I do think we're going to have a pretty thorough discussion of that with the candidates in the context of concrete examples.
Yep, Jody.
I think, you know, what I would be looking for is an openness to learning, because we're all learning. And I would say I've learned more this year than me in a year in my life on many different fronts. And I think what I'm looking for in the next chief is an openness that we haven't always done things perfectly, and we haven't always understood how the other person feels. And that's what I really want to find in our new chief, someone that is willing to learn about how others feel and be open to changing our ways to help them feel better. And so I think in our interviews, we should be able to see that openness.
We do have another question, and they say, I'm a big supporter of our police officers. I agree with Jody, diversity, equity, and inclusion is very important in new ways in this time. We don't have many Black residents and people who travel through Westford. How can our force, led by our new chief, go above past training that police in the state have received to be really significantly caring and go outside any bias they may have from living in America? Jody?
What I would say is that's an excellent question for our new police chief, and to hear what ideas they have. I certainly would expect the police chief to work very closely with our DEI committee and be committed to, as I said, learning what we can do better. So I think it's an excellent question, and I think we need to be sure that the person we select is truly committed to this.
Mm-hmm. Yep, Scott.
Well, I think also, you know, we've not traditionally ever asked our police chief, you know, to go out in the community and be involved with, you know, various groups. They may do that on their own, but it's never been something we've sort of asked as part of the role. And I think it may be, you know, time to say, to Dre's point, how would you as police chief, better improve your understanding of our various ethnicities in town to do a better job of policing. That may mean, making sure that you're at the, certain neighborhood parties, certain cultural events to see, to learn. And I hope that our next chief would be open to that.
There was a question also about the timeline, and the question is, what is the timeline for the process? When do you foresee the new chief being appointed? Jody.
Yeah, I think I answered that. I don't know if that question came in before or after, but we're hopeful that we will have a recommendation by July.
Okay, there's another question. It's a little bit long, so I'm just trying to see it. And I do apologize. I feel bad for Andrea when she has to read these questions during select board. I don't know how she can get through these. Okay, so it says when Massachusetts passed the criminal justice reforms of 2018, MGL chapter 276B approved restorative justice as a method for diverting juvenile and young adult cases. Restorative justice allows offenders to learn from their mistakes and repair the harm in relationships within the community, while also allowing young offenders the chance to avoid a record. What importance does the panel place on integrating these types of principles, especially in light of trying to be attuned to the needs of our diverse community? Yeah, Jody.
Yeah, you don't need to call on me first if you have something you want to say, but I am absolutely a supporter of working with our youth and making sure that the penalty fits the crime, so to speak. And I believe in community service over punitive actions 100%. And I remember being 17, and I'm not going to get into that, but I would love to work with the schools and try to figure out ways to have people work more with the community and community service when there's infractions than to penalize and give a record. Of course, there's obviously going to be lines that can't be crossed, but I would love to ask our new chief this type of question and get their opinion on this matter.
And I guess I'll add to that I know that there are examples of other towns that use restorative justice that we could speak to learn a little bit more about how that comes to life in action in their towns, and see if that's something that the new police chief would be interested in considering. Thank you for bringing that up for us. Scott?
As I say, I agree with Jody that, I may have gray hair and less of it, but I remember being, 17, 18, 16 myself. And we all, most of us did a few things we probably aren't proud of in younger days. And some people get caught and some don't. And that should not end your chance at college, your chance at a job, your chance for a career. So absolutely, we have to take a look at, how do we work to guarantee that this individual has learned something, does not repeat, in fact, probably improves their life through some kind of service or education or treatment in the case of perhaps drug and alcohol. Absolutely, we have to, I think, in the younger years and earlier offenses, hopefully first offenses, be less punitive and more thoughtful about how we rehabilitate as opposed to punish.
There is a question also, will the names of all of the candidates become public, or just the top 3 are only the final candidate? Jody, do you know? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Sorry. I believe all the candidates will be public once they sign up. The scores will not be public. The scores are not shared, but whoever signs up, the top 3 candidates.
The next question is, can you give us examples of what the exercises are. I don't think so.
No, because we don't want to tip off the candidates, many of whom may be participating in this tonight. So no, we don't give that out. We have to, preserve the integrity of the system. So we can tell you after the fact.
There's only so much that we actually know about it too. Okay.
Picture it as sort of a carnival house. You're going in with a lot of mirrors, and you don't know, you aren't supposed to know which way is way out of the maze. That's the whole point. So even we don't know the details of these. But this assessment center we've worked with before. We know their exercises are very realistic, appropriate to Westford, and we've been very happy with our work with them in the past.
Are there any special considerations for a candidate from the Westford community that understands the town and its people and also community? Yeah, Jody.
Yes, I definitely favor hiring town residents when we have that ability to do so. And many of our officers grew up in town. Many still live here. Some have had to buy houses in other towns, but I definitely support our police force being a large part of our community. That doesn't mean we haven't hired from the outside. We certainly have, and we go through the civil service process, but it's nice to have people who went to WA and graduated, understand the challenges of Westford, and care about the community. In my opinion, that is a plus.
I'll just kind of add that although I think I understand Jody's perspective on that, and I know that is important to a lot of residents in town, but on the flip side to that, that's not like a huge make or break for me, obviously, and I'm sure that's for other people across the board, because it comes down to the quality of your experience and your work and your leadership, right? At least from my perspective on that. And I think although having somebody who's from Westford Academy is really unique, and being able to kind of speak through and relate to kids who are there right now, or other people who've also grown up in town, having somebody new is not like awful, speaking as someone who is new to town, right? And kind of understanding, what is it like to move to Westford? How does that feel in terms of like a community sense? I feel like there's value there as well, but I'm not, everyone's different on that. I don't think my answer is better than Jody's. I just have that perspective to add as well. Yeah, Jody.
I'd also add that, I would like to understand and improve the situation of people of color in our town, and why they have not traditionally been interested in becoming a police officer or a firefighter or other jobs in towns. And I'm really hoping that our DEI committee can help us understand that, because, I think that population is underserved in our town government, and I would love to change that. And we've done a fairly good job of trying to get others involved in our boards and committees, but so far we really haven't been able to get that section of our population involved in our town government, and I'd like to do that, including the police department.
So another question is, do Jody or the police or the select board have to choose the chief from the 3 who are recommended? Do they have the option to reject them all and then look outside of the WPD? Okay.
With civil service, that would be difficult unless there were no candidates that passed the assessment. Because we are a civil service town, we are given the top 3, and if we don't choose them, we have to explain why, and that could be appealed, and that could take a year or 2. So that would be very unusual, and it would be complex and a legal matter. It would be very unusual that we did not have at least one of our superior officers rise to that occasion. So that has not happened in this town in, almost 90 years or whatever. But so that would probably end up in a legal battle.
And how will the panel assess the WPD chief candidate's commitment to supporting the Second Amendment rights of citizens in Westford? That's an interesting question. That's a good question. Scott?
I think it's a fair question to ask because the way Massachusetts state law works, the police chief in a town has got a great deal of control over who does or does not get a license to carry or a firearm ID card. So it's a question I intend to ask in terms of how they feel about how restrictive or we should be with that.
Someone shared a comment. I agree that it's helpful to have someone who's familiar with our town and have lived experiences, but do you think it's useful to look outside and actually consider new and innovative approaches? Does the consultant help with the whole process, including the interviews, or just the assessments and ranking part? I can answer that one. Okay. So they actually help with just the assessments and the ranking part, and then the top three are identified for us for the panel. Was there anything you would add to that, Jody, Scott, or no? Sorry for all of the dings. That's me trying to get through their questions. Is that the last question, Mike, that you see?
No, I see 4 more.
Okay. Oh. Someone says, excellent point and idea. Someone's like, Scott, this would be new presence all over town by the new chief.
What?
I don't know. Emily.
What'd you say? I didn't hear that.
It said, oops. Something about Scott, and it was about you, or to you, Scott, about the new presence all over town by the new chief.
Oh.
It was a comment, I think, not a question.
Yeah, thank you. If we continue to only promote from within, then the recruitment and hiring practices are even more important. What will be done to ensure that the new chief's commitment to DEI extends to recruitment and hiring so that we can diversify our force? I have a thought about that, and others can chime in as well. So I think something that is important to me, and when looking at from the lens of diversity only for myself, right? I really am looking at sort of the bigger relationship piece with members of our community. So I feel like, and I brought this up during a diversity committee meeting a while back where, we really focus only the people on the civil service list, but there's so many pieces that happen before that. And it's really, I know you can't see me, but it's really back here, the relationship building between like the police, the town boards, everybody with the different pockets of our community. And it's that part is what kind of leads up to how, what the civil service list will look like, right? So we need to be working back here. The foundational pieces of that relationship building of just being out in the community policing is something that it's important to me that I think is critical. And, I'm going to be looking for that type of outlook and just being able to know that people are thinking about the wider community. So it's not wider. So it's not just like the civil service piece, but also how do we get those pieces here? I don't think it's a fast, we're not going to see fast changes right away, right? Because it's a relationship building that takes a long time. So that's my perspective on that. I don't know if others want to add anything.
I guess I'd just say, it starts with all of us as parents and community members. Law enforcement is a career choice, and I think we need to make sure our kids understand the academy and beyond that this is a profession with a lot of responsibility, a lot of chance for advancement. To be it's a career that is, for some people, not the first choice, and for others, it could be. And I think we need to be, if we want to have police officers who are who look like our community, we have to have everyone in our community, urging kids who show that interest or that aptitude, to pursue that career.
Jody?
Yeah, and I agree with you, Anita. I mean, it has to happen before the process because young men and women need to go to the police academy or start going down the path of wanting to be a police officer. And most police officers do not switch departments, at least in Massachusetts. They pretty much go on a department and they stay on that department throughout their career. It is very unusual for officers to jump from department to department. So we really need to get at young people early and try to assist them in deciding that maybe this is a career for them to consider. So I'm completely supportive of that, and I think we should tailor some questions to the new chief about that.
Okay, there's a question of how will the panel give measure to the types of and rates of crimes that are committed in our town? Specifically, how can the panel ensure that a quantitative approach is taken such that the WPD can focus on real, concrete, measurable problems and argue statistically that the work the WPD is doing is actually effectively reducing the frequency of crimes in our town? I mean, I would probably lean on the assessment center to do some of, I don't know if Jody, Scott, I feel like that type of like a specific, I don't know, I'll stop, but I feel like that specific question would go to the assessment center. Are there, Jody?
I certainly think that that's something we could also zero in on a bit during our questions. I'm not sure I've thought of it that way, to be honest. So I think this is something that the panel should talk about and see if we can come up with a question that helps us take a look at it from this angle. I think it's a really interesting angle to look at it.
Sorry for all the things. Scott?
Yeah, I think, certainly we have as a department, quite good records of what we have in town for types of crime. So that's sort of something that I think any candidate for chief should be well aware of, types of issues that we face and how they would approach dealing with that. And of course, we need to think about severity. There will always be some level of breaking and entering in cars, that kind of thing in a town, but you want to make sure that you do focus on more dangerous ones that might involve drugs, alcohol, firearms, and make sure that we do have a chief with a plan for those.
I'm all about data. Like, I really appreciate sort of this evaluative type of question, the quantitative piece. Data is always a missing piece, I think. It's hard to get a hold of it. I know that when we had the police forum several months last year or something, it was really hard for the police to get data to help us as part of that presentation. So it's always difficult. So I think trying to think proactively about that is a great idea. There's a comment, it's not a question, it's just an FYI, that Littleton, Acton, Groton, and Bedford police departments all participate in restorative justice programs and would be good resources for the panel to talk to. Restorative justice is more than just doing community service. It's taking responsibility and accountability for your decisions and working to learn better decision-making skills. Was that the last question, Mike?
There are two currently. Do you want me to read them? You're lost on your screen there. The first one's, are the interviews open to the public?
Oh. No, I don't think they are.
Okay, that's pretty straightforward. The next question is, recently I heard an interview with Suffolk County's district attorney who is trying to have court time be used for major crimes and felonies. She has a list of 15 infractions that she is not hoping to prosecute. Could our new chief candidates and panel take a look at that list and ask questions related to the type of fewer record infractions?
we could take a look at it. I'll be honest, I'm not very familiar with it, but I could learn.
Yeah, I'm not sure of, you know, that this is sort of a, I think, a specialized question, because it's the job of the police to, you know, gather evidence and arrest an individual that isn't a crime. It's the decision of the DA to prosecute or not. That's not a police decision on prosecution. So I'm not sure that that's in the purview of the police, but we can certainly raise that issue with the assessment center, perhaps, see what we can do there. And I would note, just on a prior question, when I ran for a select board member, I talked to the various department heads about learning the departments, and that was a time shortly after we had some unfortunate incidences of domestic violence in town, and our police department quite proactively put together a program to prevent domestic to try to minimize and prevent domestic abuse. So the department's got a pretty strong track record of seeing what is happening in the community and devising programs to address that. So it's part of our tradition, I think, of Westford PD, and what I think that we would expect to continue with the new chief.
There's one more question that came in, and it asks, will the community be able to meet with the top 3 candidates and give input to the committee? I know that's not, Jody, it's not currently in our timeline to do that.
No, I think the select board did advertise for a resident volunteer to sit on the panel, and they appointed Noel. And I thought that this forum here was people to give their input, but I don't believe that would be, appropriate for this promotion.
I think that's all the questions that we've had so far, I think.
Okay, let's call for questions.
Oh, there is one. Oh.
Thank you. Thank you.
There's a question here. Question to Jody on a point she mentioned earlier. What is the best way for the POC to be involved in Westford government?
Well, I think certainly filling out citizen activity forms to serve on different boards and committees. That would be a way if you wanted to be a volunteer. If you're talking about becoming a town employee, apply for jobs. Honestly, we don't get a lot of minorities that apply for Westford town jobs. And I would love to see more of that. And so I would like the DEI to help us focus on that and help us understand why more people of color don't apply for our town jobs. I don't know the answer to that, and I want to understand, and I want to help with that. So any ideas that the public has, please share them with the DEI or with, myself.
Mm-hmm. I think Scott, do you want to
observe that, the TV is where you see people from the board, select board, school committee, but Westford's got a very small professional staff for a town its size, and those 3 visible boards are taking their advice from other committees and subcommittees. So this town really, in large part, is run by a lot of volunteers who serve on commissions and committees, from affordable housing through zoning board of appeals, A to Z. So get involved at that level. Those are decisions that aren't always made on TV, but they really do affect this town every day, and certainly its long-term trend. And from your experiences on those boards, you may decide that you want to run someday for one of the elected boards and take on that role at the policy level.
I just wanted to add that, the best way for people to get involved in Westford government. So I think in general, I think just because there's not a lot of involvement currently, I think people, I'll speak very candidly, I think people of color get kind of pigeonholed into diversity, right? And that's not really how it should be. We should just be all across, all over. We're all humans, we're all citizens, we're all residents, or whatever it is. So it doesn't matter if your interest, like I don't want us to feel like we need to be only focused on diversity. We're focused on cemetery or, Board of Assessors or something else. Wherever you have a skill set and you have time to volunteer, please do it. We have a lot of openings for help, and we need help because there's so much to do. I think Jody has described working here as like sucking on a fire hose. There's just always stuff happening. And I think as long as you have time and a commitment to get involved, you just do it. It doesn't matter what you look like, and if anything, you have more like everyone has lived experiences to share, and they're all different. It doesn't matter. So please, if you anybody who's watching later, if you have time and are interested, we're happy to answer questions about what that looks like. Or if you want to learn about a board, we can connect you with the chair to learn about what they do. Is that the last one? Oh. Thank you for this opportunity tonight and for the time each of you is devoting to this important process to have the best outcome for Westford. Thank you. Is that the last one?
That's all I see.
Okay. I'm going to do one more last call for questions or comments. Okay, great. I think we're all set. Thank you, everyone. I hope you have a really good night. Oh, Scott, okay.
Well, I was add that, this is not a one and done event. So if you get questions that come to your mind tomorrow or next day, or if you watch this, on WCAT later on, you get a question. You saw the list of all the members of the panel. Feel free to fire off an email to any one of us or to Jody as town manager. She'll make sure that we get it.
Okay, thank you everyone for listening in to learn about this process. We know it's really confusing. I had a lot of questions to start as well. We're all just going to do the best that we can, right? And so if you do have feedback or questions, like Scott said, please send them over to us because we do want to do the best that we can. We don't want to keep, we don't want to do this process again anytime soon, I guess is what it is. So we'll keep you posted, I guess, and stay tuned on how things are going. Okay. I hope everyone has a great night. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much, Mike Wells, for your help.
You're welcome.
Really appreciate it. Okay.
Thanks, Anita.
Thanks. Good night.